Charles, we're joined again today by a guest who's been with us. Hello over there, Charles. We're not allowed to touch each other anymore. Yeah. But we're joined by a guest who's been with us before, Pepper Stanley. Welcome back to the show, Pepper.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Very well.
Very well
Good.
indeed.
Now, people who've been following Crowdsource the Truth since the beginning, which, Pepper, that's you. You were a viewer who saw the shows that we were doing when Charles and I were first introduced, literally, like the very first day. Charles had received a phone call about the death of Peter Smith. Why don't you take us back, Charles, to exactly what happened and how this all came about?
Sure. Jason and I did, our first interview together from near the World Trade Center late in June 2017. And in the middle of this extended interview, which was done outdoors, my phone rang and I saw that it was from the Wall Street Journal. And generally I don't look at my phone and I don't in the middle of an interview, but we were at a break, so I answered it. And this Shane Harris character, who I think wins the Nobel Dunce Prize in people management, just gets me starts in on a tirade right away. He says, "Is this Charles Ortel?" I said, "Yes." "Well, this is Shane Harris at the Wall Street Journal. We're running with a story that says that raises questions about Peter Smith's death, and you're mentioned in a memo here with a lot of very important people. Then there's you. What the F are you doing in this memo?" And I'm like, "Dude, do I know you? Let's rewind this conversation. What is your interest? What do you want to know?" Anyway, that happened in the middle of my first interview with Jason and some other folks, and there ensued a very swift. I mean, that conversation was, I think, at maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and by that evening, Shane was on, I think, Rachel Maddow, or he was on television, I think, that very evening with his story, and it was a huge to-do about the story. And to this day, then and to this day, I have asked to see a hard copy of this supposed memo that mentions me in it, and I have never seen the complete memo. I am very experienced in my past career raising money, or being solicited for money and also raising money. I know the difference between a marketing puff piece, which is typically short, might be 1 page, 5 pages, and a private placement memorandum. People were trying to describe this document as a private placement memorandum, which it certainly wasn't. What I saw is only 2 pages long. And I noticed right away that the document was written in non-American English. The title was crazy. It is not the kind of thing that you would ever, an experienced person would ever let out the front door looking for money.
What was the title? Pedagogical?
Pedagogical approach to such and such. It's lunacy. And I pressed, since that fateful day when I first heard from this idiot, I have pressed every single person, every journalist, and believe me, many of them across the mainstream press have been in touch with me, trying to link me in, suggesting that I was the money behind this, or I did the memo. And of course I didn't, and I would never give Peter Smith or anybody any kind of money for such a project. And nobody has been able, in the mainstream press who spoke to me, whether the Washington Post, CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, you name it, all these supposed hotshot investigative reporters, nobody has been able to prove to me that they've actually seen a real memo along these lines. Nobody's been able to do it. And then here we have, Jason's put up this thing on Matt Tate, who also figures into the mix very quickly. He's supposedly a cybersecurity expert. And we have done a show before, Sony, Pepper, where we went into a company's house and in the UK to look at this guy's company. This what was it called? Capital Alpha Security or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
And this Capital Alpha Security has a total equity capital, i.e. investment in it, of £1 British. £1 British. It's ridiculous. And so this from the very beginning, and I had question marks over this in June of 2017, and now looking back 3 years later, at almost precisely 3 years later at this mess, this reeks. This was a setup from the start. How Shane Harris got into the Wall Street Journal from his prior employer, nobody knows yet. How he leapt from the Wall Street Journal into the Washington Post, nobody can explain. I spoke to high-level people at the Washington Post, and one person I've known since high school. And I said, listen, you guys get called out for various reasons, but who checked Shane Harris's reporting? He alleges that he found all this stuff. Who verified his work? And I got soft answers from everybody. So I don't know if that answers your question, Pepper, or not.
Yeah, well, and there's so much, let's call it lawfaring as a verb. I didn't know this until recently, that Shane and Matt Tate were friends. And the reason that Shane, I believe, got into this was disclosed during Richard Grinnell's recently unclassified documents, which just were recently unclassified last week. And when you hear that, Matt Tate had offered through his personal attorney to contact just a month after all of these documents broke. So you go back to 2017, as you just said, the call you received from Shane Harris would have been on June 29th,
right?
The date that Shane Harris broke the Wall Street Journal article. And that was the same day that he went on Rachel Maddow's show. And he spoke about Matt Tate's story, this Russian cybersecurity expert.
Sorry, Pepper. Look at this. Yeah. Matt Tate's transcript is number 33.
I'm going to have to get you a jersey with 33 on it.
Sorry. I think it's not fake. I mean, there's a whole plan behind this. But let me just, I don't want to ramble, but I do want to say on Charles's note that Matt and Shane were friends. So this goes back to 2015, if I can just briefly remind our audience. In 2015, the DNC was hacked, and this was on around June 14th. And two weeks later, Matt had cited in his Russian article that broke on June 30th. So sorry about running around here, but on June 28th, Matt claimed in his article that a man by the name of Peter Smith had called him to find out if he could verify 33,000 emails and the truth behind them, if they were actually authentic. Now, in the transcript, so forgive me for jumping back, but in the actual transcript recently unclassified, the date was different. And this has relevance, and I'll tell you why. The date in the under oath transcript said September 4th and September 5th were the actual dates that Peter reached out to Matt. But the reason that the article that Matt had published said June 28th is this entire group was trying to link Peter in his search for the 33,000 emails that were already out there. I mean, my God, the state server was in a bathroom or somewhere in Colorado. Our United States secrets were in a server in a bathroom or in an apartment in Colorado. And then the backup was in Chappaqua in the home office of the Clintons. So you go, okay, somebody would have hacked it. Maybe it was the Chinese government or the Russian government. But the reason Peter was still on this in 2017, and Charles, while you guys were talking, is Peter wanted to create some sort of uncovering of those, which would have been 33,000 emails that would have identified probably fraud and all sorts of illegalities. And he was speaking to you because you were working on the Clinton Foundation, and so you guys had a kind of mutual interest. But let me go back to Matt for a second, because Matt was trying to tie that reach of 33,000 emails, which Peter was, he had a quest for, to this link of the DNC hack. And so the audience, if you weren't on top of this as much as we are, you would realize
Filing history.
And you would make your own assumptions, and which is what they were trying to convey, that Peter had tried to get the Russians and General Flynn and this whole group of people to be part of the hack. And it doesn't make sense because Peter, in all the notes and correspondence that he had with you, Charles, he said there was no Russian state involvement. And everything you have, and in all the under oath documents that I've seen that were unclassified, Matt Tate said there's no tie to Russia. And Matt Tate also said that there was no tie or allusion that there was any involvement with Flynn and all of this. And Jason, I'm kind of jumping around, but I just want to make sure that the audience knows that those two guys knew each other. And then the third person that's really behind all of this lawfare stuff is Ben Wittes. Yeah. And Ben was the one that got all of the, this media breaking starting on 2 days after Peter's death. So Ben created this thing called the Tick, Tick, Tick media campaign. And Ben was friends with Shane, and Ben is friends with Rachel Maddow, and Ben is friends with Matt Tate. In fact, Matt Tate works now with Ben. They all do blogs together. They're all in the same media, and they all kind of add a story and then make the story bigger in the media. So you don't really know where the original story and the intent of the resource comes from because it's just so elusive. It's hard to track. But anyway, I'll stop talking for a second because I want you guys to intercede here.
Sure.
I think that helps the audience at least know that this is a group of guys that have been working for a long time together to bring a story of untruth. And if it weren't for the unclassified documents, we wouldn't begin to get to that truth.
Yeah, so if I can maybe try to fill in a little bit of context here, which I think will help or may help. Jason, if you can go into Google and punch in Giacalone and Ortel. It's I think it's, first one's an A. Giacalone, and then Ortel. You should get, this story here.
Here's a guy who might know.
Yeah. So, we know, and this article explains in some depth, and on the Hillary R. Clinton FBI vault file, we've done several shows that talk about a very odd incident that happened in January, two incidences that happened in January of 2016. The first is that early in January 2016, and mind you, now this is primary time. This is when Bernie has a shot. There's a lot of enthusiasm for Bernie, and there's little real unpaid enthusiasm for Hillary. And so a senior State Department official sends a letter to Dopey James Comey. We have two versions of the letter in the Hillary R. Clinton vault file. We don't need to go to that now, but it's a very lengthy letter. And it's direct to Comey with evidence, and it says, hey, I am a senior State Department official, long-time service, here's recommendations, I'm a reputable person. I have specific evidence of criminal wrongdoing by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama in mishandling classified information. And I want to go into a skiff with you, James Comey, and I want to show you what I know. And the first version of the letter that you can see on this vault file redacts a lot of stuff. There's another version that comes out later that unredacts certain stuff. And the sum and substance of what he was saying is that unlike previous administrations, where the President of the United States understood that everybody in the government swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, in this administration, the view was, you work for Barack Obama. I tell you how high to jump, and that's how high you jump, and don't you bring up the pesky constitutional issues. That was the nature, it would seem, from the letter that this person was really concerned about before the primaries started. Dopey James Comey's secretary did not respond. Dopey James did not respond. So this person walks into the Washington field office on either January 26th or January 27th, 2016, and demands a meeting. The 302 for that meeting, for that incident, is not written out until the third week of February. In all this brouhaha about Flynn, we learned that 302s are supposed to be completed within 5 days. So something was odd. So this is the end of January. This State Department person has sent a letter to Dopey James, has walked into the Washington field office where Giacalone was based. He was the person leading, or a senior person leading the mishandling investigation, and suddenly he leaves. Then, February 14th, if you go back into the Companies House thing, look and see where Capital Alpha Security was formed. This is Matt Tate's company. It was filed on February 15th, 2016. Now, the suspicion that Andrew Napolitano had, and that he got in trouble for saying on Fox, he was bounced off Fox for a number of days, is that we have had, the US and the UK have long had an arrangement, maybe an informal arrangement, where to get around our laws of spying on Americans, we go, hey mate, or whatever you say to an English person, why don't you spy on Jason? Because I can't do it. I'm the CIA and the FBI. I can't spy on Jason, inside this country. Why don't you do it from the UK? And then we'll spy from the US on Matt Tate when he's in the UK. And then we'll just get together, have a pint, a meal, whatever. The taxpayers will pay for it. We'll fly first class back and forth in private jet. And that's how we'll get around both sets of laws, making us, like the mafia, we're both guilty. The second we go down this path, we know we're breaking the law. They know we're breaking the law, and each of us knows the other are breaking the law. So now you're sworn a blood oath to break the law together to promote whatever it is they want to try to promote. So it's very suspicious to me that this thing is set up with one English pound. Now, I've set up and been involved in the setting up many companies and many English companies. You can't even buy a pint of beer for a pound. It's preposterous that you would set a company up with 1 pound and try to be a serious player in the UK raising money or having customers. Nobody would deal with you if you only had 1 pound of capital.
Well,
so
it's
that's
obviously
suspicious.
a shell company. It's a shell company, obviously.
Right, but you don't say on the basis, well, I was able to spend 1 entire English pound on my cybersecurity company. I worked for 3 years at GCHQ. I've left off on my
Google Project Zero. Let's not forget Google Project Zero.
I was going to go back in time. He probably left off his high-paid job as a lifeguard down in Cardiff, Wales, or something. I mean, it's just this person does not have cybersecurity credentials that are very impressive compared to the people around him. Yet Shane Harris is representing, as you say, his friend as a cybersecurity expert. And you look down this company, you look at his age, he was born in 1988. So in 2016, that would make him what, 28? Yeah, 28. Right, he's a 28-year-old kid, 1 pound company. Now, I grant you, many people who are my children were very good at computers by age 8, 9. So it's possible that he's pretty good with computers, but it's highly likely this person has no practical sense, has never really been through the ringer before, and he's now trotted out as this off-the-shelf person who's going to be, Harris is going to say, he's an expert, a worldwide expert on this, and he's the one who's now going to claim that he didn't like the direction in this Lawfare blog, what Peter Smith was saying, what Peter Smith was asking him to do with all these emails. It just doesn't hang together. If you put somebody out there who spent 20 years at a real set of companies with has had successes and failures and has learned from his mistakes, I'll buy this. But this 28-year-old kid, I'm sorry, has far less experience than Peter Smith had.
Can I interject? Both you guys are making such great points. There's some other pieces that I would love the audience to know. Number one is in the conversations that you would believe went on between Peter and Matt, you would think there was a long ongoing relationship, but actually there was only a 1 call that was made on September 4th. At least this is what Matt said. That said, hey, I'm trying to get a hold of you, Matt, call me back. So on the September 5th, Matt called Peter. They had a 45-minute conversation about, hey, can you authentically look at these and confirm that they're real emails? But if you look deeper in the transcript, Peter never said he had the emails, and he never said it was a Russian state, and he never said that he could share them unless he got an NDA. So then the next conversation happened on September 12th. And between there, I guess Matt never even Googled Peter, like, who's Peter? And Peter made some comments that you would go, God, who is this guy? I really want to, if I'm going to work with him, I should just at least Google him. I mean, everybody Googles everyone, right? We want to know who everyone is if we're going to work with them. He said he never knew who he was. And if this is all under oath, but whatever. So then the next time he gets this call on the 12th, he says, I don't want to work with you. And then there's this guy named John Safran who works for Peter and keeps trying to send emails and so on, which went on until early October. And according to Matt, he never, ever responded back to Peter. So here we are. You would think Matt is an actual Peter expert, knowing everything about what Peter was trying to do, but these are based on 2 very brief phone calls, right? So that's the first piece. And the second piece, which I think is really interesting, Shane only had 1 call also. And it was the day where it was the first conversation happened, not that Peter called Shane, which is what Shane is telling the public, but Shane tried to get a hold of Peter through John's LinkedIn site. And remember, John Safran was a kid, an intern in trying to work and build up credentials under Peter. So he's a young kid. He was just an assistant. The long and short of that is Shane's going out there saying, hey, this guy's trying to reach me. He wants to talk to me. He wants to verify some things, which is a lie.
Well, Pepper, sorry. Let's just give some more detail to that, because you've said it, but I want to make sure people are hearing this and absorbing it correctly.
Sure.
John Safran, he has a LinkedIn profile. Shane Harris contacts Safran via LinkedIn and says, hey, have your boss Peter Smith contact me. In response to this request, Smith contacts Harris, but everywhere since Peter Smith's death, Shane Harris has been saying, hey, this guy contacted me. This is a social engineering operation right here, to have somebody else tell the target to contact someone. This has happened to me many times.
It's actually, I talked to Peter right after he spoke to Shane Harris, because Peter called me and said, I just spoke to this guy, Shane Harris. I think he characterized him as a lefty. And he's a young reporter, and I would encourage you, Peter said, to speak to Shane Harris as well. Peter claimed that he told Shane Harris of my concerns about the Clinton Foundation, the fact that Peter and I have been working on that informally since, call it August or thereabouts, 2015, and he encouraged me to speak to Shane. So I called, and immediately I called Shane, and he didn't call me back until that time when I met Jason.
And it's worth mentioning the time that you met me, Charles. I was with George Webb and Patricia Negron, who I fully suspect of being social engineers. And that doesn't mean that every social engineer is talking to each other, but I do think there was a plan afoot to rope you, Corsi, Stone into a story that would be tied back to Peter Smith and tied to President Trump's public statement that, hey, Russia, if you know where these emails are, please try and find them. But this is, we've got our buddy here. This is some of the broadcast here from, what's her name? Rachel Maddow, talking with Shane Harris about all this. Tell us a bit about this, Pepper.
Okay, so here's the other interesting piece. And it's all a media campaign, and it's all very tied to, which is the lawfare piece, is you tie the military kind of strategy on creating ideas on how you're going to take over, or, and this is really a military coup, if you will, to take over the government. Then you partner with politicians, and you partner with people in the media, and they come up with this entire plan, which we saw played out starting 2 days after Peter's mysterious supposed suicide, which we can come back to. But the long and short of that is Ben starts this tick campaign on the 16th, and then it comes out he tweets again like on the 19th, and it goes on for a month. And as he's doing that, he's building up suspense, and you're hearing about that. The next thing you hear about is that there's this guy by the name of Peter Smith that Wall Street Journal Shane reports that, hey, this guy died. And I just talked to this guy. So that was on the 14th of July. And on the 29th, there's this blitz where and I talked about this a second ago, you've got Ben Wittes and his blog, and he's interviewing Shane. You've got Rachel Maddow. You've got her tweeting. You've got Shane tweeting. They're all quoting this Russian interpreter by the name of Matt Tate. So it gives this story great credence that, oh my gosh,
Matt
what's going
Tate
on?
is a Russian interpreter?
That's how they defined him. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So, and if you look in the transcript and all of this, it starts to come out, and then you tie his story. And so anyway, but the biggest point of this is that it is a media rollout that's continuing, because the evolution of that has gone on with these same players from time to time. And it's been exposed over, because we've known about it's been exposed over time. Even if they move from Wall Street Journal to, Charles said, the Washington Post or whatever, they continue the storyline. It doesn't drop. So every time they could bring in Peter and associate him, even though he's dead, and they leverage his death, because
exactly
they can easily lie and say he was on the record when in his emails he said he wasn't on the record. They can easily leverage all of the things that he said, which we'll never know, because...
Well, hang on, let me pause you, Pepper, because not easily.
Yeah.
They thought they could do it easily, but they did not know that Charles was in possession of emails that directly refuted things that they were saying. Peter said to Charles in emails that he did not believe that these people were...
Well, we're going to show them the emails when you want us to. But
this is a perfect time, you guys, to bring that up. Charles, you're holding amazing evidence that counters all of their media lies.
Sure. Let's get into that a little bit. Jason, can you pull up the story where Assange is saying that Hillary Clinton's going to go to jail? Do you have that? That's the one. I believe that story was in June of 2016. And he was interviewed by an Australian on an Australian show. I think it was ITV.
Problem is you put in Assange in jail and now we get all kinds of...
Yeah, here, does Julian Assange really have an email that will get...
Is that it?
This is... Julian Assange, you see down here, has laid his cards on the table. He wrote earlier this week in the New York Times in an interview with Robert Peston of ITV on June 12th. Assange suggested that he not only opposed her candidacy on policy grounds, but also saw her as a personal foe. So I saw, I think, an earlier version of this, or a different article that mentioned that, and I saw the dump of DNC emails, and I saw nothing pertaining to the Clinton Foundation that I had expected to see. I assumed that somebody in the black arts of the defense side of the DNC would have said, look, if Hillary Clinton's going to be the nominee, we have to have our ducks in a row in the Clinton Foundation. There should have been memos back and forth to staffers saying, what do we do about this, and what do we do about that, and what if somebody says, none of that. So I saw that, and right away, more leaks to come. Right away, I sent an email to top people at Fox with a copy to Roger Stone saying somebody needs to get to Julian Assange in London. And I amplified that in a follow-on email, saying what we know about the Clinton Foundation doesn't make sense. And I suspect, I said in the email, I suspected that whenever we do get these emails, it's going to have to do with the Clinton Foundation. And I was proven correct in September or October when they started coming out. But I sent that on July 25th. And Jason, if you do Ortel July 25th and Assange, you should get to multiple stories. But Laura Rosen on Twitter, here you go. She's one of the people I spoke to. There's the email, Monday, July 25th, 2016 at 11 in the morning. And she published it to James Rosen, to Andrew Napolitano, and to Roger Stone. And Rosen came back saying, I'm told WikiLeaks will be doing a massive dump of Hillary Clinton emails relating to the Clinton Foundation in September. Trump comes out on July 27th, 2 days later, and says, how about those emails? Find me those emails. And this is at the same time they're trying to gin up. The FBI, mind you, we know from the Horowitz report, the first Horowitz report, we know that FBI investigations, plural, were opened up into the Clinton Foundation in January 2016. Now, why it took so long for them to pretend they were investigating is beyond me, because a private person suggested in May to Comey directly that there should absolutely be such an investigation. Bill O'Reilly called for an FBI investigation, and 2 months before that, in March of 2015, I wrote my first an early Breitbart piece where I said, with so many red flags, why isn't the IRS investigating the Clinton Foundation? This is in March of 2015. So the real members of the patriots in the IRS, the patriots in the FBI, the patriots in the Justice Department, they know a lot more than we do about what files should be in existence in relation to this Clinton Foundation investigation, which Horowitz verifies, plural, were opened in January. We know the State Department official walked in January. We suspect, the senators now suspect, all of us suspect, that the investigation, the monitoring of Donald Trump started and his family way before he was selected, or it was clear that he was going to be the nominee. Way before. We know from just looking at the Clintons that they pioneered the use of the war room in Bill's first campaign, national campaign, in 1992. They were attacked first in January of 1992 over the Jennifer Flowers story. By March 8th, 1992, when Jeff Gerth's story came out on Whitewater, they had assembled what they called the defense team. It included Hillary Clinton. It included Loretta Lynch. It included Vince Foster. And the strategy was to list out all the potential areas that they might be vulnerable on, and then attack anybody who might bring up and have, stuff. So you knew that they had to do the same sort of thing, going back to the 2007-8 timeframe. So there had to have been lingering concerns, big concerns about the Clinton Foundation as Hillary mounted her first attempt to win the presidency, and certainly back again in 2015 and 16 when she tried for a second time. So where is all that information? So going back on the context, you said she walked out with the stuff on the secret servers. I'd go back way before then and I'd say, now wait a minute. We saw this presidential transition of Barack Obama replacing Bush. And everybody understands, and maybe the policies should be changed to make the transitions more seamless. Everybody understands that a new president who has never actually had much national experience, in Obama's case, he'd been a senator for 2 or 3 years. That's it. A new president is a campaigner. It is a heroine. It is a very tough thing to go around the country and the world campaigning. You don't know if you're going to win till the last second. Then you win. You got to catch your breath, and then you've got to put a government together and start governing by January 20th. In this transition period, we've done show after show. On November 16th, 2008, Valerie Jarrett signed a supposed memorandum of understanding having to do with the Clinton Foundation. Not a single word of the document was correct. Okay? She had only been co-chair of the transition committee for a few days. Her birthday had been the preceding Friday, her 50th birthday. And I think she got or Friday or Saturday. So they're just coming off this brutal campaign. They're reacting from it. They don't know what they're going to do next. They're also under suspicion because of Blagojevich and people trying to sell Obama's Senate seat. The FBI's on them for that. The FBI's on them for other things. And they signed this MOU. Podesta likely was involved with it. Many people were involved with it. Who did the diligence on the Clinton Foundation? The Clinton Foundation back then was a disaster.
Well, now, wait a minute, Charles. We should back up for a second because you're talking about a lot of people who are connected for a long, long time. I mean, you mentioned Vince Foster. Obviously, everybody knows what was going on with Vince Foster. And you and I have been speaking quite a lot about Whitewater and some of the other things that were really kind of like the ground floor, entry-level criminal activity that established the Clintons as players, we should remind people that Peter Smith is not some guy who just showed up looking for emails. Peter Smith has been a thorn in the side of the Clintons for many, many years. He created a fund back, I think, in the 1980s to provide remuneration to Arkansas state troopers who were fired as a result of blowing the whistle in Troopergate.
He hired David Brock to write the story.
And he hired David Brock, who's now very tightly connected to John Podesta.
And George Soros.
And George Soros. I don't know what the connection is there with the Brookings Institute or the Lawfare blog, but we're starting to see a collection of people who we might call social engineers, or who might use social engineering tactics like creating blogs, doing live stream videos. And the thing that these guys really want to do, listen, let's face it, the thing we all want to do is for these stories here in alternative media on YouTube and elsewhere to graduate to mainstream media. This interview that I just did with Dersha, which is enjoying some attention, and it's doing that to some extent. But I think that's what Ben Wittes and Shane Harris, and with their friend, the rogue scholar, Rachel Maddow, they're moving these stories from the world of social media into the world of mainstream media where they gain some credibility. Wouldn't you say, Pepper?
I would say so.
Yeah.
And we know there was kind of I would suppose, a hit list, if you will, of people that the Clintons didn't really like. And we know Corsi probably was on it because it's coming out in transcripts. Charles, your name was mentioned in the transcripts. We had people that Peter Smith was on as well. And so you wonder if these people weren't targeted by this select group of people to go after. And Peter ended up dead. Now, that's a whole other mysterious story. And I don't know how deep we want to go into that rabbit hole. But Charles, you talked to Peter, and it was the day before he supposedly killed himself. Tell us a little bit about what happened, that conversation.
Sure. I think what we could do, Pepper, is we've got some emails to share, and maybe we go chronologically. Yeah. Sort of. Is this the furthest one back, or that's the? Okay. This is an email that Peter sent around on October 30th, 2016. Okay. And sent it to me and other people using his Proton Mail account. He had various accounts, but this is a Proton Mail. And I put this up there. This is, I would say, the way Peter wrote. He wrote emails like typically short paragraphs, punchy sentences. He didn't need instruction from Jonathan Safran on how to write. He had a distinctive style. He typed this email himself. You'll see this. Former lead FBI agent John Giacalone. Peter noticed this. He was steeped, Peter, in intrigue. He knew all the ins and outs, almost encyclopedically of whatever the word is, going into the whole Clinton scandals, going way, way back. He knew about the Clinton scandals. He knew about the Bush scandals. He knew about most political scandals. And this is, a lengthy thing that he sends around before we know whether or not Donald Trump is going to win. And just as we learn that there are 650,000 emails on Wiener's laptop, or Uma's laptop, 650,000. And then after the day, I guess this is the day of the election in the morning. This is the election was Tuesday, November 8th. At 9:26 in the morning, he sends this around saying that the FBI the night before had confiscated all evidence that the NYPD had gathered. Now that's interesting. So the night before the election, Comey's FBI makes a decision, most likely involving Strzok, to confiscate this stuff that the New York Police Department had gotten. So who authorized that? 650,000 emails is more like the number of emails I would expect to have seen on Huma Abedin's laptop. Remember, Huma Abedin, Anthony Weiner's wife, then, and I guess still, is somebody
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. That she had been, let's just say, very close with Hillary Clinton for a long time. I mean, she was really the gatekeeper to Hillary Clinton, or one of them, through the campaign. She was expected to have a very high role if Hillary had won Secretary of State. I expect 650,000 emails, and I think a lot of these emails likely had to do with the Clinton Foundation, had to do with donors, to the Clinton Global Initiative, who were seeking favors and getting favors from Hillary Clinton, from the U.S. taxpayer, through the intercession of Hillary Clinton. They were people who were worried about governments around the world chasing Clinton Global Initiative and Clinton Foundation donors. These, if you had a Federal Bureau of Investigation, that was really investigating stuff, you would want to say, I'm not going to allow dopey James Comey to search this treasure trove with somebody who's deaf, dumb, and blind, and restrict the search terms, and in a short period of like 3 or 4 days, conclude, nothing to see here, nothing, absolutely nothing. We know that that's a lie, because on this show we've surfaced an internal memo that's available through the vault file that says, an analyst says, hey, I noticed that there's a lot of stuff on this email and this laptop, and we're supposed to only look at stuff pertaining to underage minors. So we're not going to search this trove for anything other than that. Well, there's a lot of stuff in here that has nothing to do with underage minors and everything to do with the largest unprosecuted global criminal conspiracy to use charities and politicians, corrupt politicians, to have donors get large favors of consequence through the operation of the nefarious Clinton Hydra charity scheme. So this is another one that went out by Peter. You see at the bottom, it's best Peter, right?
Yep.
Keep going, Jason. There's
several more. I want to bring them up so that you can see them and make sure I got the right one before we show everybody. This is private.
Okay, yeah. This is an important thing that I only saw today. I have a lot of emails, and I am much worse than Peter Smith would have been, because Peter had experience in the data processing, in the tech field that I've never had as a more technical person. But an article appeared in Politico that basically lauded, and there's the link to it, lauded the idea, raised concerns about presidential libraries, and lauded the idea that the nitwits who had originally set up the President Obama Foundation had decided that rather than hold physical records in the Obama library, the Obama Presidential Foundation was going to get together and digitize all those records and contribute the digitized versions, or put those in this library, and thereby force the National Archives to still shoulder the expense of storing all these paper records at taxpayer expense. That's in strict opposition to what they said in their application, and it clearly does not comply with the Presidential Libraries Act of 1955 as amended in 1986, or the Presidential Records Act of 1978. So here's this idiot from Politico who gets this paper in, and you're trying to sell Barack Obama as a visionary. Other presidential libraries are scams, not the Barack Obama thing. So I send this email, like the email, which we can go back into if it's okay, Jason. Chapter and verse, people can see this now. I guess they can get it somehow through, maybe we'll post it on the broadcast or something, some of these links. But if we stop here for a second, the original Articles of Incorporation of the Barack, this foundation, assert a purpose, a religious purpose. Now, how is Barack Obama's presidential library a religion? It isn't, is the answer. And the reason you want to try to do a religious purpose is because religious charities are exempt from certain donor, they're less, you can find out less information about a religious charity, but it has to be a religious charity. A presidential library is not a religion. The cult of Obama, or the cult of Trump, or the cult of Bush, that is not a religion. And so just on its face, this fails what's called the organizational test, in my view. But of course, corrupt Loretta Lynch, at the time this was organized in 2014, was our Attorney General. She had been on the original defense team back in 1992, in March of 1992. She was one of the attack people who held off Jeff Gerth, the famed New York Times reporter who won a Pulitzer, for exposing Whitewater. She knew where all the dogs were buried. Bones were buried, literally, as did some of these other people. So I provide chapter and verse about the need provide IRS memos, and you can just scroll through the page. It's a pretty lengthy email with lots of detail. And do I get a response from this Yahoo at Politico? Of course not. But this email went out days before Peter Smith died. And I copied Peter on it. And I spoke to Peter about it, both around the time I sent it and then also the day before he died. So I'd forgotten that I'd sent this out, because of so many different things going on. But here's clear evidence, and it really excited Peter to talk about this because Peter had Chicago contacts, including 2 trustees. I knew another trustee, and I'd already reached out to one of the trustees telling him, look, dude, I mean, I may not like anything that Barack Obama did, but he deserves to have a presidential library. He's the first African-American president. That's a historic achievement. It's, I was born when segregation was still legal. And to see, that kind of movement, to go from a place where blacks were marginalized completely to one where this guy is now president of the United States for 2 terms, he deserves a presidential library. So let's organize it properly. I had begun a conversation with this person I'm not going to name who's a trustee that culminated later in the year with me actually speaking to the general counsel of the Obama Foundation and explaining my specific concerns. So, and Peter was all really into the idea of, once he got done at the Mayo Clinic, going back and there's 2 specific people who were trustees that he knew well, and he was going to go to them and say, listen, you've got a problem, and I don't particularly care for Democrats, but I do want to help you fix this problem. Will you please speak to Charles Ortel about it? So that was really the focus of our conversation, Peter and my conversation, the day before he died. But I wanted people to make sure they saw, and I guess we have my email address up here, but that's okay.
Do we? Oh, sorry about that.
It's all right.
I had deleted that.
That's okay.
Well, Charles, sorry.
That's all right.
Some people have seen it, but that's on your website.
It's fine. It's not exactly, but it's all right. It's out. Doesn't matter. So then the next email, okay, this is pretty interesting. This is an email that I BCC'd to Peter right before his death, and we talked about it on May 11th, and maybe we pull this, Corinne Brown, the African-American congressperson from Florida who was in an election contest in 2016 when Dopey James Comey and company made a decision, it's $1 million charity fraud, maybe, involving an African-American woman who had been a long-serving member of Congress. She was controversial, but she'd been in for almost 20 years or so. Let's go after her after we clear Hillary Clinton for mishandling classified information by not actually looking at the real facts, because Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are too busy tweeting and doing other things, on the side, instead of actually going to the heart of the issue. Let's go after Corinne Brown, an African-American person. And then at the same time, why don't we go around and say that, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton is we love black people. We're all going to help. We're going to nail the poor black congressman, and then we're not going to look at Hillary, the biggest unprosecuted set of frauds in history. The double standard here. This is something that Peter and I also talked about the Saturday before he died. And so I hadn't surfaced this before. Now this is something, December 19th, I think you may have seen this before. I've sent a lot of stuff around. This is an email that Peter sent out to a lot of people. Here he recites that he formed this KLS research in August 2016. And here he says, we came across people who had possession of the emails. None of these groups were tied to Russia as a nation state. Now he forms this in August of 2016. So Matt Tate, when he met in September of 2016, would have gotten this type of a story from Peter. Peter, one of the things he would do, and he liked to chat. So he would tell the same story, frequently, let's just say. and he would hardly ever change the story. He just stuck to the story.
That's good.
Which was,
it speaks to his reliability as a witness.
Well, and also just his approach in life. By that time, he was past 80. I mean, he's been doing this. He was a button-down kind of person in the way he tried to do his work. So none of these groups were tied to Russia as a nation state, he says. This is in August of 2016. Now, if, as a guess, the FBI had Peter Smith under suspicion at this point in time, who knows? They may have had this email at the time. back in 2016. So one or more individuals conveyed these emails to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks, he says, had these emails earlier in 2016. So before August 2016, WikiLeaks may have had these emails. The question is, from who? So what does the FBI do when the time comes to check and see who hacked the DNC server? They say, well, our people are busy. It's the summer. Dog ate my homework. I can't find Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Why do we outsource that to a firm that's not actually going to look at the server, is just going to do a report and say, yeah, it was definitely hacked? I mean, this is preposterous. That's not the way the FBI operated with Paul Manafort. It's not the way the FBI operated with Roger Stone. It's not the way the two very nice FBI agents insisted on seeing me moments after I learned that my ex-wife was about to die any minute. They said, no, unless we want to meet with you right away. I said, okay, I'll meet with you. And so when they decide that they have a narrative they want to pursue, they'll throw the book at you. They'll use the leverage that they have against you. But when there's a set of inconvenient truths that might implicate Republicans and Democrats, involves hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars of taxpayer money, then we lose interest at the FBI. We're not, anyway, so we go down this. We see here WikiLeaks saying no nation state was involved. If you keep going on down this, he alleges that George Clooney's wife had been a supporter, was involved in WikiLeaks as a lawyer.
Yeah.
And she was very much against the WikiLeaks project to dump the Podesta emails.
She quit over that.
And she quits over it, yeah. And this talks about WikiLeaks would welcome a friend of the court brief for Julian Assange, which is a topic we didn't do justice to on Sunday. This idea that we had a great poster, you'd had a great poster, Un-American Gangsters. You would have thought that of the many people in the FBI, many of them I'm sure are fantastic people, but there's got to be some. Hard-nosed person is going to say, all right, let's think about this. We have a hack of the DNC server. We have Hillary Clinton and her people keeping all of our nation's secrets on unsecure servers. We have a secret server problem. We need to get through and understand who, were the secrets that went through the Hillary Clinton toilet bowl server system, were those zealously guarded? Or as a result of that approach, did a lot of our nation's secrets filter out beginning maybe even before January 20th, 2009, as she was going through the confirmation process? How, given the lax security system, how badly was our security compromised as early as the transition period, as Obama was trying to be sworn in as President of the United States? Does anybody ask that question? Of course not. Of course not.
Before we get out of the moment. So here's important knowledge. The DNC team that was working with Hillary during the time of the hack was the best IT team in the entire world. We had Eric Schmidt of Alphabet Google. We had Google Project Zero cybersecurity team. We had people like Michael, I think it's Slaby, who was part of Timeshell at the time, one of the brilliant IT digital marketing and gurus behind the Obama IT campaign, and was moved over and currently now oversees basically all the DNC digital campaigns and advising. So you had a crackerjack team, right? So where were they during the DNC hack, and why didn't they step in, and how did that all happen? They would have known in a nanosecond if there was any kind of hack.
Well, we're racing over some important things here, because everybody outside of the people on this broadcast who I have ever asked if they've heard of Google Project Zero always answer no. And we should remind viewers that Google Project Zero is an elite team of hackers that are set up by Google ostensibly to search for exploits in devices ranging from the Internet of Things to video game consoles to routers to absolutely anything that connects to the Internet. And then the idea is Google's going to let other manufacturers know when they find potential weaknesses in their products, so that the Internet can be made a safer thing. Now, this is fine if you trust Google, But if you suspect that Google might use a team of elite hackers to do something other than benefit all of mankind, then Google Project Zero becomes something that we might want to look at. It's important to remember that our friend Matt Tate, who has figured so prominently in this story, he worked for Google Project Zero. He worked for GCHQ. These are very Five Eyes type jobs for this guy to have. He had a Twitter account called Pawn All the Things, PWN All the Things. He doesn't have that account anymore. It's been totally deleted. And I find that Twitter is something that social engineers enjoy using, because when you delete things from it, it just adds a lot of layers to trying to get them back. If you're gonna, try to litigate or something like that, it's not that easy to find the evidence necessary.
Yeah. Exactly. And exactly right.
Should we talk about Matt Tate's testimony, Pepper?
Yeah. Well, I want to say one more thing too, is that
Sure.
in January, Ben had a long Twitter account at Lawfare Blog, and he basically got rid of all of his previous tweets. I don't know if legal, they told them to get rid of all that. It was evidence, but everything that he had originally that would have sort of connected it to this story is pretty much gone. I had most of it, so I still do, but a lot of this has disappeared, and even the Wayback Machine isn't working now the way it used to. You can't track a lot of this.
I agree with you that Internet Archive seems to have been touched by someone who has the ability to perhaps archive certain things and not archive other things.
But so just going back into the context a little bit, it strikes me that letting the FBI, which I believe the FBI is one of the chief arbiters of whether you pass a background check, right? If you posit that there might be crooked people running the FBI, in the FBI at senior levels, then does an election really matter? That's the moral of the General Flynn story. It almost was the moral of the Barack Obama administration, in that Ben Rhodes failed to win a security clearance while George Bush was still president of the United States. He failed it. And then Obama said, that's okay, I need Ben Rhodes. Somebody has to corrupt the media, so we'll put Ben Rhodes in. His brother's the head of CBS News. So this process deserves, like any industrial process or any service process, you put it out on a map, and you look at where the weak points, the choke points. And it would seem here that the FBI, giving the FBI director 10 years to past one president's term, is fine if you can trust that person. But I think I have seen no evidence. I do not trust Christopher Wray, based on Sidney Powell's reporting in a book and what's happened. I just don't trust the guy. A serious investigation would not be impeding Tom Fitton, wouldn't be impeding the Clinton Foundation, wouldn't have allowed, a serious FBI would never have allowed what happened to Donald Trump and Roger Stone and Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn to actually happen. You cannot, the person at the top of the food chain, Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, the FBI head, would never, if they had a moral compass, say, given the non-evidence here, given the conflicts of interest, the manifest conflicts of interest, there is no way that we are going to open an investigation, first on the Russia hoax, and then when that doesn't work, on Ukraine. And now we hear that Adam Shifty Schiff, size 6 neck, is going to open an investigation. They're already talking to the Supreme Court about bringing up impeachment again.
Can I interject, you guys? So Peter died 3 years ago this week, right? And yeah. Before we leave, I know we have only a few minutes, but I would like to talk about.
No, we have all the time you need.
Okay, because there's that part of this, but I want to say you've got Matt Tate up there, so let's just talk about that. The reason that we're talking today is the recent unclassifying of all the Richard Grinnell work that had been done by the Adam Schiff, Devin Noonan's transcripts and reports. And when Matt Tate had the original conversation with the Adam Schiff team, it was through his attorney. And the attorney is good friends, and the attorney's name is Michael Bitkauer. And Michael knows a guy by the name of Andrew Weissman. We've all heard that name, right? And Michael, this attorney, also had a background having worked at the FBI. So here you have a particular guy in this part of the story whose attorney says, hey, I'd love to go on the record. Do you guys want to interview my client? And who calls Adam Schiff's group from the United Kingdom and a story that dates back like 3.5 years and says, I'd love to get this on the record? So that's suspicious, right?
Well,
Absolutely.
isn't it suspicious that the guy is under 30 and he's a former British intelligence officer? How the hell does that happen? Maybe if he was 70 or 80, I might begin to believe that. But I think that this is an active British intelligence officer.
And I agree with you. I think that one of the revelations that's going to come, I have no inside information, it's just from having watched this for 5 years. One of the revelations that's going to come out soon, I think, is that it wasn't the Russians who interfered in the 2016 election. And it wasn't just the 2016 election that people should care about inside this country. It was that supposed allies of the United States of America participated in multiple elections to interfere and affect the results and obstruct the process by which the American electorate could know the truth about candidates in each of these elections. Inside this country, in Kenya, in other countries, with regard to the Brexit referendum, I think what we're going to find out shortly is that as bad as things were in 1975 with the Frank Church Committee trying to rein in the CIA after assassinations around the world, it's only gotten worse. That there are now too many security agencies. They've been engaged in too many projects around the world. Their eye is not on the Constitution. It's on the book deal afterwards. It's on the contracts that they can get. Brennan's security firm, as one example, Downer's operations, the international types of operations. There's a pathway to glory, in quotes, for these people who are supposedly on the dime working for just the American taxpayer, not the British taxpayer, the American taxpayer, and certainly not the UN and the World Health Organization. We're going to find out, I suspect, through all this, that the rot runs really, really deep. That as people watched Teflon Don Trump make it through, he just obliterated Jeb Bush and the others. He made mincemeat out of Hillary Clinton in the debates, in my opinion. He won despite all the rigging, which I think there was by the Clinton operatives. Despite all that rigging, he nonetheless won. And when that happened, right the day that he won, I think the next day, the head of either GCHQ or MI6 resigned suddenly. People looked at this and said, oh my God, if this guy manages to actually sink his teeth into the apparatus of government and then starts asking his loyal people to go back over the ground we've plowed as far back as 2008 and 9, maybe further back into the Clinton years, maybe further even before that into the H.W. Bush and Reagan years, and before that, if people loyal to the Constitution working for Trump re-examine this ground, we are all sunk. We're going to prison. Hillary Clinton made such a statement, I think, to Donna Brazile, according to her book, along those lines. That's, I think, how you have to look at all this. It's bad for Flynn, the situation he's in. Sidney Powell's doing yeoman duty. But these are sort of tactical things to consider. We have to understand the wider strategy of what was going on here. People who think they're puppet masters around the world, maybe the Bilderbergers, people like that, saw in the post-World War II era a chance to let national politicians pretend they're actually running countries while they sat up atop that and created these multinational for-profit and not-for-profit organizations that were above the law. And that could be used to launder dirty money, could be used to pay off politicians, could be used to make a lot of money actually that's not taxed. And they assumed that they'd never be caught. Inside the countries, there are robust, in theory, investigative operations and attorneys general and the like, but there is no such international operation by design. And there won't be in our lifetimes. There won't be in the next 500 years because we're so far apart, say, between the communist China and ourselves. So these people said, what we'll do? We'll create this pathway for corruption. And as technology gets ever more powerful, will our power versus the serf, the worker, will get higher and higher and higher. People will become dependent on government, and we'll be the puppeteers. We're going to call the tunes. That's how I see this evolving, and Flynn being a cog in the puzzle. Remember that Flynn was a lieutenant general, I think, a 3-star general, 33-year veteran. If they can do to Michael Flynn what they did to him, what they're doing to him now, Emmett Sullivan's doing to him now with other lawfare creeps, if they can do to the President of the United States, a multi-billionaire, what they've done to him in 2020, what do you think they're going to do to somebody in 2024 and 2028? And so this is a much bigger story, I think, than just Peter Smith. And it's kind of, the reason to bring Peter up is he was somebody who didn't aspire to political office. I think, like Jason, I can't speak for you, but maybe you're going to run for senator someday. But I certainly have no interest in politics, and I'm not saying that to be coy. But Peter was somebody who valued the American experiment, valued the Constitution, wanted to do something to stop the diabolically corrupt Clintons from winning in 2016 legitimately, to educate the public, as I was trying to do and continue to try to do, so that people would make an informed choice. That's what really drove Peter. It wasn't dirty tricks, in my opinion. It was simply that, to get this country back on the track that it deserves to be on.
But that made him the enemy of those that were trying to do the opposite of that.
Right.
Didn't it, son?
Right.
Pepper, didn't that happen?
Well, and we talked a little bit about, here's a guy who ended up in a really mysterious place where, Jason, you and I went down and looked at the hotel room.
Yeah.
And the day before, Charles, you have that great conversation. He's looking forward. He's talking about things he's going to do in the future. And then the next day, within less than 24 hours, he's dead. And when Jason and I looked at the hotel room, we actually walked into the room, and there were a lot of inconsistencies from the police report, and then also from the comments that were during some of the housekeeping and staff interviews. And the biggest thing that Jason and I were trying to figure out is, how is it that a man in the morning is found dead with a plastic bag over his face, and a guest in the hotel his name is James Wright. He kicks in the hotel room because the housekeeper couldn't get in, and he just happened to be walking by. So now the evidence on the key card and when and how often that door was open was now evidence had been tainted. The second piece of that, so when we looked back at the document from the people that managed the key carding, they couldn't track when and how often that door was open with exact accuracy. The second piece that the police documented is that the man who kicked the door down took the plastic bag that was apparently part of the suicide operation and removed it from Peter's face, which is unfortunate because then that evidence was tainted. And then there were some helium tanks that only one of them had been used during the suicide, apparently. But the fellow this James Wright, kicked the door down, and then he took the bag off, and then he leaked out the remaining contents of the helium. And so there was no justification on when and how much was left in the tank, blah, blah, blah.
Now, wait a second. Pepper, let me pause you a second, because this is all extremely important stuff, and I'd like to cover this in some detail.
This is all police report documents that you're looking at.
Yes, this photograph came from the police report, and what it shows us is 2 tanks of helium, this balloon time helium, which is intended for filling up party balloons. But there are some things here, like there's this thing Velcroed on here, there's weights. These are like leg weights. They look like you'd strap these around your legs for exercising. There's a lot of unexplained details in some of this. And Pepper, when you had initially contacted me, and just to be clear, you were a viewer who saw our show and said, oh wow, this all occurred in a town kind of close to me. Let me look into this. And I mean, you've uncovered some amazing evidence. In our last phone conversation with the local police in Rochester, Minnesota, They flat out said, we have more evidence, meaning you and I, Pepper, have more evidence than the local police, and that the incident was essentially closed because they're a small police force. I want to run this again. We've shown it before. This is surveillance footage from the Walmart. There is a shuttle bus that goes from the Aspen Suites Hotel to the Walmart. We can notice that the individual here, this is alleged to be Peter Smith. He's wearing a Chicago Cubs cap. Now, separately, I've observed on Facebook, Jonathan Safran's Facebook page, there are several pictures that show him wearing a Chicago Cubs cap. A lot of people from Chicago like the Cubs.
Other people wear baseball caps.
A lot of people wear baseball caps. I don't know Peter Smith well enough to know if he's the kind of guy wearing a baseball cap. I personally wear baseball caps infrequently. I don't know if that means anything. Charles, you're frequently wearing a Yale cap. If we saw you somewhere wearing a Yale cap, that might not be strange. Pepper, we've tried to contact several members of Peter Smith's family with no success. But just sticking on this footage for a second, we can see Peter Smith purchasing only one helium tank. And let's look at it for a second. Doesn't seem like... Okay, now that guy just took out some tubing, it looks like. That might be the tube that he took out there. But there's one tank, there's one tube, there's this open box. And after we first did a story on this...
In that card, is that the same card? Do you see the credit card?
Can we see it?
You see it there?
Yeah, we do see it. We'll take a look at that. That's a very dark colored credit card. We ran this footage, and someone who works at Walmart actually sent me a screen capture from Walmart's inventory system, which indicated that this Walmart only had one helium tank in stock that day, the day that Peter Smith died. And it's also important to note that there was no car at the hotel associated with Peter Smith. His family is not aware of how he got there. This is a pretty spread out rural town, and without a rental car, it's extremely difficult to get to this Walmart. Pepper and I took the shuttle bus that's offered by the hotel to the Walmart. We interviewed the bus drivers who didn't remember an 80-year-old guy carrying a helium tank. But the big question in my mind is, if Walmart has only one helium tank and Peter Smith is shown purchasing only one helium tank, how did two helium tanks get into the hotel room? This is a fundamental evidentiary, this has got to be explained. We cannot just have a helium tank materialize. Where did these leg weights come from? These are going to weigh 5 to 10 pounds each. Is an 81-year-old guy bringing all this stuff to his hotel room to kill himself? Why not just go buy a bottle of Sominex and a bottle of Jack Daniels and, sit in the hotel watching Netflix and do that? This is a lot of complicated gear. Doesn't seem to me like this is the way somebody sitting in a hotel room by themselves would do it. It seems like this is some complicated lengths to go to, perhaps to achieve some other goal. Now, I don't know. This looks like pretty heavy tubing to me. I don't know if that's the same tube that we saw rolled up in the video. This looks like black tape holding it on. Somebody's gone to great lengths to make sure that that stays there. Now, Charles, you were pointing out the credit card that
was
he was
this
using.
one down? American Express Serve?
Well, what is American Express
I don't know.
Serve? I've never heard of that before. Pepper, are you familiar with American Express Serve?
Well, and I guess...
Ooh, we've lost Pepper. Hang on. Let me get Pepper back. Sorry.
Things
Sorry,
occurred too,
Pepper.
as we went deeper and called the police department.
Sorry, Pepper. We lost you. We lost you there for a second.
Sorry.
We've got you back now, but we lost everything that you just said. Can you repeat for us, please?
Sorry about that. I just want to say that the suicide note that he left behind was really odd, and it didn't say "I'm so sorry" or I'm caring for you because I want you to take the money I'm leaving for the insurance policy. It was pay no foul attempt has been done here. So, and big bold letters, that's all he left. And then his laptop wasn't there. There was no computer. Maybe he threw it away. I don't know. But all of his information would have been on there. And then other things occurred. So when we called the police, Jason and I were trying to ask, well, what happened. And they said, well, frankly, at the time of death, we didn't know who this guy was. So we just basically said it was a suicide. The guy was cremated quickly and we moved on. And then later we found out he was kind of a big deal. And so we went back and we noticed there were discrepancies in some of the information and some of the questioning and responses. And so then we turned it over to the FBI in the Rochester office, and we didn't get any information from that point on. And when we tried to get that information, we couldn't get it either.
Yeah. So it's unclear if the FBI has his computer or what happened to the computer. We still don't know how he got to the hotel. I am just going to bring you back in here, Pepper. So, Charles, what do you think about all this?
Well, in just looking at this, and it's been a while since I've looked at this. At some point, I'd love to see that note at the very bottom, if we could turn it around and try to read it. But the cost of the purchases that he made in that video are far less than the cash that he seemed to have had at the time. So an opening question for me is, why wouldn't he have used some of the cash? I mean, if you're trying to disguise a suicide, I think the last thing you want to do is have an entry in your credit card bill or your debt, whatever it was. 1 tank of helium.
Good point.
He had the cash to do it.
Right.
Why didn't he use the cash?
Excellent
point. There's something, and I also agree with the point on suicide note. Peter was meticulous. When he would send me an email without Jonathan Safran's help, most likely. I mean, he really thought things through, every aspect of what he was trying to get across. He tried to have his message be succinct, meaningful, focus on the right elements of whatever he was trying to explain. Why would he leave such a suicide note, which would appear to just send you away from the foul play route when there's so many other indicia of foul play? I mean, And why, again, would our vaunted FBI say, you know what, we're not going to investigate that? I mean, they didn't come talking to me about it until December of 2018, after the election, when the Republicans had done such a poor job of holding on to the House. All the transcripts that we're about to talk about, Pepper, those were obtained when the Republicans still controlled the House. And so, why didn't the Republicans go over this ground more aggressively? What was holding people up? What were they afraid of looking into here? And do we have a swamp problem that involves Republicans? I think the answer to that question is definitely yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I think we have the suicide note here. Yeah. Here's documents left by Peter Smith. Now, Pepper, this came from the police report, right? So this is a photocopy of the document.
Wait a minute. There's a typo here? Sorry to have involved you. First of all
caps.
I never received any email from him ever that I can remember, and I got a lot where everything was in all caps. Okay.
This is the suicide note. It says, to Southern Minnesota Regional Medical Examiner's Office.
Well, but let's just look at this. He was a stickler for detail. Look at this. Below is complete statement, 2 colons, not just 1. He would never have written that. Below is my complete statement. That's not a complete sentence. That's a mistake. Sorry to have he would never do that. Right? He knew how to, I don't know what that said.
That looks like a B that's been written over.
Yeah. You, and appreciate your assistance. No foul play whatsoever, all self-inflicted. No party assisted or had knowledge as an accomplice before the fact or after the fact. I mean, right?
I don't know. Is this something perhaps maybe someone like, but not exactly Jonathan Safran might have written?
Well, somebody like that, but reason is recent bad turn in health since January 2017. No need for the comma. Timing relates to life insurance of $5 million expiring with no G, a G handwritten in. This is, to me, this was not typed by somebody where English is the first language, right? Or who cares about
Or
detail.
wasn't nervous that he was going to get pinched for being involved in killing somebody.
Right. Now, I don't know if that's his signature or not. That signature could have been inserted into the
Well,
document.
we've seen the signature elsewhere in his will and things like that. Now, I want to reveal some things here that you two have no knowledge of and nothing to do with. And if anybody wants to sue me, I'm ready to have it.
Right.
But so, Pepper, you've communicated with Peter Smith's daughter, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So she's married to a guy named William Ransom, who's an insurance attorney. Now, I'm not accusing William Ransom of anything, but would an insurance attorney be involved in cashing out a life insurance policy when the claimant committed suicide? I don't know. It seems like the type of thing that the insurance company might push back on. It seems like the type of thing that an insurance attorney might get involved with. This doesn't mean that William Ransom has anything to do with this. I'm just asking that question. I did try to call William Ransom, and I found that at some point he was running some kind of video blog type Facebook show called Ransom Note Report. And I called the phone number associated with that. It had 33 in the number, just coincidentally. The guy who answered said he wasn't William Ransom, and I have heard William Ransom's voice on voicemail messages at his legal office, outgoing voicemail and stuff like that. So I don't think this person was William Ransom, but the phone conversation was so bizarre. The guy was desperate to find out who I was, who I worked for. He was Googling Jason Goodman while I was on the phone with him, which, by the way, do that. There's thousands of us. But he was desperate to know who I was, why I wanted to contact William Ransom. Haven't been able to contact William Ransom's wife, Peter Smith's daughter. Pepper, we were calling them because we feel that we have information that their father-in-law was murdered. And you would think the family would be interested in that, right?
Yeah, I think if you recall, this is a couple years ago, right? So this is all, like, if you thought about this now, you might realize what we were, our suspicions. But back then, I'm sure they were under great pressure to try and figure out.
Well, I should add, my phone calls to William Ransom, they happened today.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. So all I know is the calls we made back then. I haven't followed up, and I would presume that none of them want to deal with this, including John Safran. They've moved on out of fear.
Well, let me add some info about Jonathan Safran, because he's now working at a law firm that he wasn't at when we were first trying to find him. I found it strange that someone in his 20s who is, according to his testimony, hired by Peter Smith for his computer expertise. Charles will speak to that in just a few minutes. But, this is a guy just out of law school, I would think, looking for jobs. Didn't keep his LinkedIn current. Didn't keep where he was living and working on Facebook current. But just earlier this week, in preparation for this show, I noticed he's working at a law firm in Chicago. Called there, got the, dial your person different phone directory, and a computer voice confirmed that I had reached the extension for Jonathan Safran. And then I got a text from a different phone number saying, "You've reached Jonathan Safran." And I've called that phone number so many times since then, no answer. So all of these people are very reluctant to answer the phone. Some people are just like that. If they don't recognize a number, they won't answer.
Well, to put it maybe in relief, you have, because sometimes that gets the point across more effectively. Here you have, when we look back at the Russian hoax, we now have these 53 transcripts. We have lots of information. Everybody back then was saying, there is no Russian interference. Flynn told the truth. No reason to suspect anything. All the official under oath testimony was, there is nothing here. So what do? We turn the country and the world upside down. We escalate tensions with a nuclear armed country with which we've had problems in the past. We torture Jerry Corsi. We torture Paul Manafort. We torture a bunch of people because the evidence at the time says there's nothing here. And the apparatus says, oh, let's ignore the evidence and let's just persecute our enemies. Whereas in contrast, This one, we have a case where the evidence is like, there's so many unanswered questions. What are we going to do here? We're not going to do anything. I mean, if that isn't a clear sign that the scales of justice are completely out of balance and need to be recalibrated, I don't know what is. If this isn't a sign that there may be too many resources in the FBI that are not regulated properly, and not enough resources in the local police department in Rochester, Minnesota, to pick one example in Chicago, I don't know what is. If this isn't a sign that, particularly under the Clintons and maybe under the Bushes, that law enforcement has gotten too close to the political process, and law enforcement is now being used to persecute political enemies of the people who sit on top of the food chain, no matter who the president is, the swampists, and to let people off the hook associated with the political system who should be in prison. If that isn't a sign, just the contrasting Flynn with Smith, if we can't see that, then we don't care to see. You know, I think the Peter Smith case reeks. Jason, you were making the point, as does the Flynn case, that, you know, when you go and you've got an insurance policy and you try to collect a small amount of money,
They always fight you.
they hit you hard, because that's what they have to do. They have to, you know, they tell you you're going to get this benefit, then you try to get it. They say, well, you should have.
Oh, you were wearing sneakers. It was Thursday. Raining. You can't pay.
My personal favorite on that is flood insurance. I don't know if you know about flood insurance, but when you purchase flood insurance and you have like a big rainstorm, let's say, come in and your house gets flooded, they say, well, that's not due to the flood, it's due to the rain.
Oh.
And so you didn't have rain insurance. So, I mean, here's a case where a guy has a policy, $5 million policy. I would imagine the insurance adjuster likely, I would hope, is going to say, now, wait a minute, you know, let's look at the terms of this policy. Some policies do pay in the event of suicide, I believe. But, you know, was there a record that people in the insurance company say, wait a minute, you know, we want to know, get what happened here? Did the folks, you know, we know from now the vault file records for Hillary Clinton, which is now 40 parts. The last time we saw one another, Pepper, I think it was like 12 parts. It's 40 parts. It's tens of thousands of pages of original material. That's for just the mishandling of classified information investigation. How big is the vault file in the Clinton Foundation investigation? The one that supposedly happened, the real one, not the one that's, you know, that's online. The Clinton Foundation investigations from 2001 to 5. How big is the file on the Clinton Foundation investigations that in theory were open January 2016? Okay? There's a whole bunch of information that cries out for real investigation. How come, you know, Devin Nunes and Trey Gowdy and the people who controlled in the House and were in a position to investigate and shut this Russian hoax thing off at the get-go, how come they didn't jump on it in the very beginning? How come they didn't demand to see the FISA warrants and the predication memo that opened the investigation into that started the Mueller witch hunt? How come nobody? These are lawyers. Gowdy's a prosecutor. How come people with experience didn't, back in 2017, stop this thing at the jump? How come that didn't happen? Where's the evidence of what they tried to do? You know, that's where we should be right now. Not merely saying, you know, it's Obama, Obama, Obama. No, it's not just Obama. The swamp runs deep. You know, sure it's Comey, sure it's Brennan, sure it's a lot of people, but we have a bunch of Republicans and maybe independent people and many bureaucrats decided that the Constitution didn't matter anymore, elections didn't matter anymore. They were going to pull the country and push the country in whatever direction they might want to do it. And they were going to do it because they had a system set up, this is my working theory, a system set up to reward themselves, reward their extended families, reward their mistresses, reward their lovers or whatever, with fat contracts and jobs and payments and stuff that they never deserved to have in the first place. That's a series of questions that I think really cries out for examination. A lot of people, particularly Clinton team, had a lot to hate about Peter Smith. They therefore had a motive. They had a means and they had an opportunity to do something against this guy. We've got a crime scene that was not intact. Have you ever tried to kick down a hotel door? I mean, what person in his right mind, his or her right mind, would do that? Maid says, I can't get into the room, so my answer is I'm going to kick the door open?
Yeah.
No, you call the front desk and you say to the janitor, come on up here and, you know. So that's completely odd. who is this James Wright guy?
Now, is this too explosive to share?
No, you shared it.
I mean, we don't know what this means, but this is something called Block Shopper, and it seems that there's a home at 925 Beverly Place that's owned by this William Ransom, Linda Smith Ransom, who's the daughter of Peter William Smith, and there's someone named William Smith listed as an owner on this property.
Yeah, I don't know.
So that's interesting, isn't it?
It was purchased in 2012.
What happens if one of the owners of a property dies?
I just don't know. It depends on the will.
The ownership would probably go to the other owners, or I don't know.
Can I say something
Please.
about the pressures under Peter before his death might explain why one would commit suicide. So let me just say, the little I know is that Peter had a son who was arrested for underage sex and was jailed. And as I understand it, Peter was really impacted emotionally by that. And then the question is, was he also financially impacted? I know he ended up really under great pressures financially near his death. So were people coming after him that we don't know? Were people trying to leverage his son in a way to get at Peter? We don't know. Some really curious things that currently are unanswered. So I think as Charles is saying, there might be a chance to reopen this or certainly look at this. And the other piece of this, long after Peter's death, John Safran, his intern aide assistant, had, as Jason noted, pretty much closed a lot of his social media accounts. But in the transcript, Jonathan said he had a closed Twitter account that he hadn't used for years, but someone had access to it and they tweeted on it as if it was connecting to Russia, and all of the message was in Russian. So who did that?
Right. And you raised another interesting point. Jonathan Safran, we go back into the history a little bit. Peter Smith was very instrumental in efforts to contact the Attorney General of Arkansas in 2015, in the summer. That's when I first met Peter Smith, on the phone, by internet. And shortly thereafter, a duo approached me and said they wanted to help. We'll leave their names out of it. But I think Peter Smith, again, was on the radar screen for sure in 2015, and very much on the list, the naughty list of the Clintons, going that far back. So after that happened, I was all over the place criticizing the Clinton Foundation. I intend to continue to do that till we see justice. And at some point, we learned that this Jonathan Safran is not just any old law student. One of his professors is the Deputy General Counsel of the Clinton Foundation. So is it an accident that Jonathan Safran found himself working as an aide to Peter Smith? Or did the powers that be at the Clinton Foundation say, look, we got just the person to go into the Peter Smith office? How Jonathan Safran came to work for Peter Smith is a question that needs to be answered. And I was involved. Jonathan would breathlessly say, that to Peter, and Peter would call me and say that Scott has disappeared. His law professor this is before the election. He's disappeared. We don't know what's going on. And when you look through the Podesta emails, Scott Curran comes across, frankly, as an idiot. And I think that he's got all these jobs that he does. If you go further down, he's an adjunct professor
at the college where,
and that's I think
Safran
spelled
went.
ADJUNK. Jason, I think we should
adjunct.
But here, senior legal advisor, Chicago, New York, Little Rock, and beyond. Beyond me. But I mean, for 9 years and 8 months, he's senior legal advisor. Sorry, for 8 months, and for prior to that, 2 years, he's general counsel This is as the Clinton Foundation is being investigated by the FBI, January 2016. This dude is a adjunct professor, and what's his name, is in the middle, is a student. Now look at this here, Deputy General Counsel, January 2007 to February 2014. Let's just recite some of the things that are wrong with this approach. It is very bad practice to keep the legal records of a corporation outside the home state of the corporation. You may keep redundant records, but you certainly want to have, it's an Arkansas corporation, you should have had all the legal records, and indeed the general counsel, deputy general, should have been in Arkansas. Just in January 2017, the largest piece of the Clinton Foundation had ceased to exist, had been completely screwed up, right? The Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. And at the end of this year, December 31st, 2007, the home state of that operation said, your license authority to operate in Massachusetts is involuntarily revoked effective December 31, 2007. I could go on and on and on for maybe doing 200 videos on it, which we've already done, about all the problems that it was illegally organized, illegally operated. And here we have this doofus who comes in as deputy general counsel. Where did he go to college? Where did he go to graduate school beforehand, Jason? If you go down a little bit. He spent 2 years at the Clinton School of Public Service. He was in the first graduating class of the Clinton School of Public Service. You know, think how dumb you have to be to decide to go into the Clinton School of Public Service without checking to see whether that entity is actually a thing, whether it's lawfully organized in Arkansas. And it wasn't. Whether the paperwork of the Clinton Foundation whether they had authority to do this. They didn't. Whether the financials were proper, of course they weren't. So this doofus goes to the school, completes the degree, and says, you know what, I think I've had such a great experience out here in Arkansas, I now want to protect the Clintons, and I want to be deputy general counsel to a fraud. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to stay there as long as possible. I'd like to interact with the FBI in these investigations. That's what I want to do. Based on that experience, I'm not going to build a consulting practice, around the world. I mean, this is
Why
a person.
Not an iridescent haberdasher.
Exactly.
That would be a good thing for this guy to do.
I mean, it's just, to me, it's just.
Okay, This is curious. I didn't make this link until this very second, but so Scott's in Chicago, right? And,
yes.
the Obamas were in Chicago. The foundation's going to be in Chicago for the Obamas. We also know that a lot of the original IT team that originally joined the DNC and built out all of the technology were there. And Scott was involved in that as well, in the cybersecurity stuff. But the more important thing, because he's a fundraiser and nonprofit guy, he sits on many boards, and some of the boards he sits on are with a guy named Michael, I think it's pronounced Slaby, or Salby, Slaby, S-L-A-B-Y. And Michael is the fellow I told you about earlier, who is the person who is currently helped the DNC, Hillary campaign, Obama's campaign, was the head of IT for Obama and set up the whole digital system for Obama, even after he got in the White House. So you look at that, those two guys knew each other, so they all are intertwined, right? And Michael he had a company during that time called Timeshell, which is Timshel. He's since moved to New York, and he's advising all of the DNC on all sorts of political strategies, and it's all pretty much digital related. But yeah,
that's
so
interesting. That's very interesting. Another
connection. So thanks for saying that. That's great.
No, thank you. I didn't know that. And that's Luke Sanders is the scruffy guy first, and then below him Scott. Another point to mention, of course, is it's quite interesting that a guy, I forget his first name, I want to say it's Al, but it may not be. His last name's Wilhelm, Wilhelm, was...
De Blasio?
No. was the, I think, chairman of Bill Clinton's 1992 campaign, even though he's from Chicago. And he's also instrumental in the Obama campaign. He also is on the board of the Clinton Birthplace Foundation. So there are, I think, very interesting links between the Obama team and the Clinton team. I think I always, when I think about this kind of stuff, and again, my area is investing in companies and not really journalism and not really politics, but when I try to get to the bottom of a problem, I like to think about motives. And I also like to think about exposure areas, risks and motives. So we know, because Jerry Corsi has told me personally and has told the world, that the people, and I said on our shows with Jason and me, that the team that instigated the Where's the Birth Certificate book were the Clintons. They made known to Jerry that that might be a project that he should pursue. So he did. We know that.
The Clintons told Jerry Corsi?
The people close to the Clintons instigated the Where's the Birth Certificate book. Jerry, the light bulb didn't just go off in his mind. He was thinking about different projects and he thought about this. And he was encouraged to do it, right? So we also know that the Clintons are legendary.
That's a very social engineering move too, by the way. You should do a book about this.
Right. And so we also know that the Clintons are legendary in their opposition research approach. So if anybody knows the truth about Barack Obama, the Clintons do, right? We know that Hillary was, as the British like to say, rather cheesed off at losing the nomination in 2008. We know that there was a détente meeting on June 5th, 2008 at Dianne Feinstein's house. And we know that afterwards there was a New Yorker magazine cover that put Michelle and Barack Obama in terrorist outfits with submachine guns in the White House. They weren't too happy about that. We know that the chair of the Arkansas Democratic Party was, as Hillary likes to say, fixin', that's what she likes to do as well, to do a floor challenge at the Democratic Convention in 2008 when that person was murdered in his office. And the person who murdered him, as in the Jack Ruby approach, was executed just afterwards. So we know that happened. We know there was great animosity between, these are all facts. I mean, there was great animosity between the Clintons and the Obamas. Bill Clinton saying to Ted Kennedy and the Kennedys, just years ago, that guy would have been bringing us coffee. How can you endorse him? And that supposedly sent Ted Kennedy into a fury and pushed the Kennedys to embrace Obama. So we know there was a lot of tension. Explain to me how the person who had vanquished McCain, which wasn't hard, but it was now the first African-American president of the United States. Explain to me why that guy, who's obviously very proud, I mean, every other sentence out of Barack Obama is I this, I that, me this, my legacy, very proud. Why would that person have immediately surrendered and said, okay, you handle international policy, arguably a lot more fun than hanging around Washington, D.C. You go do all that stuff. You can do all this with secret servers, unvetted devices. You can USAID, the money spigot, that's not going to be separate anymore. We're going to put that in the State Department. You can do all that. Inspector General, we don't need one of them. Why would that person do that and then say, all right, now as for my Attorney General, I want to have a Clinton pick. And keep it, always it's Clinton picks. Why would you do that? I'm not a politician. There's no freaking way in the world that I would do that, given the history that, was known to the public in 2008. No way would I would have said to Hillary, forget this, keep your friends closer, your enemies closer, right? See that wall over there? You're going to watch this wall for 8 years. And if I decide to endorse you, if you decide to run in 2016, I may get behind you. But just watch this wall and don't you dare do anything. I control the FBI. I control the CIA. My people are going to those places. Don't F with me, is the message I would have given to her. But he didn't, right? And that's in part because the FBI at that point was honing in on what really happened in Chicago. There were other issues and other exposure areas. There's enough work here. Jason's built a whole new network exposing not only this, but the scandal. So you would think that a real bunch of investigators would really sink their teeth in. All we can do is have working theories and write articles and do podcasts. If I were in the FBI, in the Department of Justice,
this would all be done by now.
It would absolutely be done by now. I'm not asking for that job, but I'm just saying, the only way I can explain the length of time this is taking is that real people are looking at it and they see the enormity of it. and they don't
paid by the hour.
It's also true. No, but they don't want to just say victory is at hand. I've put dopey James Comey away for 6 years. That's not what you need to do here. The entire long laundry list of criminals, and it should include Republicans, or if they're guilty, or could be proven guilty, it should not be simply a partisan thing, because it's not a partisan problem. It's a gigantic problem. And these people need to be finally exposed. I think there is a mood in this country. I don't know what you see out in your part of the world, but in New York, in the elections recently in California, people do not regard politicians as geniuses. I mean, this rollout of the COVID-19, all these experts saying we got to lock down because of some model that's now totally wrong, and we've destroyed a quarter of the economy doing this. I think there's a mood here. People want retribution. They want justice. They want the scales of justice to be rebalanced, and they're not buying the mainstream BS.
Agreed.
Well, and I can speak from the middle of the country that some really amazing, great things have come from this COVID quarantine. The silent majority has had time to do some research and figure out what's really going on. And they don't like what they're seeing, and they don't like that they're losing their country to a small group of control freaks. They don't like that they are being told, it's the D's versus the R's. It's not a Democrat and Republic problem. It's a us versus them. And there's two new emerging parties. It's either them or it's us. And us are patriots. Us are about getting rid of corruption and crime in our government. And I think that's been a remarkable thing. And thank God for people like you and Jason who have been out there making this kind of information accessible. I don't think anyone's watching cable television or mainstream is just dead. My friends don't even look at it anymore. So I think we are on a new path. I think this is an exciting time, but we can't lose the momentum. We need people to be out there and volunteer and do research and give it to people like you two to try and make action out of it.
Now, just to take us back for a moment to some of the evidence that was collected, while we've been talking here, I've just looked up this American Express Serve product. This was one of the credit cards that was found. Now, I mean, what this is telling me, for some reason the page from American Express is not loading, but this is American Express Serve is your full-service, reloadable, prepaid account.
That's odd.
It is. Why would an 81-year-old guy have a reloadable, prepaid American Express card unless it was giving it to maybe his intern or his employee who he wanted to be able to make credit card purchases without running up his own bill and also without giving him a corporate card that he could go crazy and spend $1 million on? That sounds to me like what somebody who is hiring people to work for him might have. What do you think, Charles?
I think he was in financial distress. I believe his condo was in foreclosure, I think. And maybe he just had horrible credit.
Now, what do we know about this? This looks like an access card to something other than a hotel room. It's got his photograph on it. It's almost like an office access card.
I don't know. But what further down the page, Jason, there's that list at the bottom.
Yeah.
Is it possible to reorient that so we can try to read it, or is it just all crossouts?
I think we can do that. How do we rotate the page?
View, maybe? Rotate view. Yeah.
We want this counterclockwise.
Well, while we're looking at this, Charles, did you get other emails that you think are pertinent to this story today?
I've got many. I think I can't pull them up right now.
No, that's fine. But I mean, what's curious to me is we're almost letting him speak from the grave.
Right.
And I think that's a great opportunity this week to celebrate. He was an intentional guy with great purpose to uncover bad things. And I'm only glad that we can try and convey that to the audience and get some of his truth out.
Yeah. I mean, his life obviously was an unfortunate end, and it probably took some zags in the wrong direction towards the end. But his motives, were certainly far purer than the people like the Obamas and Clintons and Bushes, for that matter, that are interested in milking the office of the presidency for the benefit of themselves and their families. I mean, that's sad. Yeah. If you go back, obviously, George Washington had passed away shortly before I was born, but so I never got a chance to meet him. But the history books suggest that George Washington, first of all, was quite happy after the war, living on his vast estate. Well, it's not Monticello, but I forget the name of it, but whatever, it's a beautiful estate. And he was actually, some argue he was phenomenally wealthy financially. So, and he was offered the chance actually to be king, and he turned that down. And he just did it. He was the first president. He actually, technically, was not the first president inside the United States of America, but that's a digression. He was the first president under the U.S. Constitution, and he just, he did the job. He got the country up on its feet, and he then retired and died. He wasn't trying to milk the presidency. Thomas Jefferson is somebody I probably shouldn't like for his politics, but people don't know this about him. There were some diabolical things in his political life, but here's a person who was the governor of the state of the colony, or the state, I guess, of Virginia. He was the author of the Declaration of Independence. He was the founder of the University of Virginia. He was the first foreign secretary to France. He was vice president. Then he was president. And on his deathbed, in his will, he said, here's what I want. I want you to say that I was author of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, which is the first thing that came up with the idea of separating church and state, that I was the author of the Declaration of Independence, and that I was the founder of the University of Virginia. That's what I care about. Do you think that's what's going to be in Barack Obama's tombstone? Or the Bush's, George W. Bush's tombstone? Or Bill Clinton's tombstone? Bill Clinton's tombstone is probably going to have like an exhibit where you have a continuously updated solicitation for the Clinton Foundation if we let him get away with it.
It should say
but now, wait a minute, guys. Before we get...
Say what Peter wrote. No foul play.
Right.
Right. Before we get too far off the Peter Smith topic, I think we still have some more evidence to look at here. Now, Charles, you pointed out quite astutely, Peter takes out a credit card here when he's paying. Now, why would he have a reloadable credit card? I know, I've had
with the cash.
Well, why does he need cash? Exactly. That's very suggestive that the credit card is to be given to somebody else. And I don't know, that doesn't look like the same credit card to me. It's very difficult to see, but...
He does look left-handed as well. He's putting the card in with his left hand.
Right. I mean, it's very hard to tell from this low-quality video if he's using this American Express serve. Now wait a minute. I just thought of something. We have the Walmart receipt. So let's look for that. Where is that? Oh no, I have it here.
There you go.
So we have the Walmart receipt.
Chase Visa, it says.
Oh, Charles. So there we go. So obviously he's in Walmart purchasing with his Chase Visa, which is not an American Express
Where is that
card. Where is that card? What is going on with this American Express preloaded card? And the reason I keep coming back to that American Express card is because there are other things suggestive that somebody else had access to the hotel room. There were 4 key cards.
Is that American? That's a key card, is it? The top one?
That's not the key card for the hotel room.
Looks like a credit card.
It might be. No, you're right. This and this look like key cards for the hotel room. This looks like an access card for some other building.
No. It says EBCO is a bank card. This card to be used only by a member to whom it was issued. East Bank Club, whatever that is.
You're right. What is that?
The one at the top, though.
Yeah. Pepper has identified in a previous show 4 separate... What was the name of the company, Pepper, that did the card keys?
I can't remember the key card company, but I called them, actually. It was an old key card company. The hotel, remember, is Aspen Suites, which sits across the street from Mayo Clinic. And I called them and I said, listen, there's been all this information that says that, well, let me even step back. The original day the police showed up and they looked at the key card documentation, it read a certain number of times of entry and dates and blah, blah, blah.
And you need cards. There were 4 separate cards.
4 cards. So anyway, when the police left, they said, we may want to come back. So don't open the door again because it will change, it will clear everything. But when the investigative team went back, it had all been tampered with and changed, and they couldn't access any information, and the machine that monitored it was not accurate any longer. So, and that may have been because the door was kicked in, and so that just, it basically broke the key card box.
But it was the thing that was important in my view about 4 separate key cards is that seems like a lot of keys for one person. It could be the right amount of keys if 2 people were staying in that hotel room. And the fact that there's that second helium tank there is certainly suggestive that somebody brought that there from somewhere else. Perhaps someone with a car who could have driven Peter there and left. And I mean, I'm not saying that someone was Jonathan Safran, but I'd sure like to ask him if it was.
Well, there's got to be rental car receipts. There got to be.
Well, we don't know if it was a rental car. It could have been Jonathan Safran's own car. And if there is a rental car receipt, has anybody asked Jonathan Safran about that? I mean, in Jonathan Safran's testimony that was just released by the DNI, Pepper, they didn't go into any of that, right? They were basically just laying down, sort of papering over the facts with nonsense from Jonathan that Peter Smith didn't know how to use a computer at all. Yeah. Let's talk about that, shall we?
Sure. Which, you want to look at the Safran thing first or the tape?
Did Peter have a computer company?
Peter, I'm not sure at that time what he had and didn't have. He had a business that was competitive with Info USA, which is the Vinod Gupta's company that basically was in the business of I think, monetizing mailing lists and managing databases and things like that. He was very familiar, at least he talked a big game to me. And my father's still alive as a nuclear physicist, so I'm used to people talking about stuff that I have no idea what they're really talking about. Peter wasn't at that level, but he seemed to be more conversant than most 80-plus-year-old people with tech. Interested in it, tried to keep up with it. So, Jason, how do we... this is the Safran interview?
Yes, this is a phone interview with the committee, the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. So this is Adam Schiff interviewing these guys, right, Pepper?
Yeah, yes.
Also, one of our commenters is telling me that American Express Serve can be reloaded at Walmart. Yeah, what do we think about this testimony, Pepper?
I didn't think it went deep enough, first of all. I mean, you would really want to be inquisitive getting him for that amount of time and understanding his relationship and how, how they got to know each other, what he said during his last conversation. Did he seem like he was a guy that was going to kill himself? I was surprised that they just didn't go deep. The other piece is like, do you know how he ended up there? I don't think they even really cared, or they would have asked that kind of stuff.
They didn't ask how they got to the hotel. They didn't ask him much about that at all. It was mostly about his interactions. Safran tells the committee that Peter Smith told Safran to set up a Proton Mail email account, which is an encrypted email account. That's not consistent with somebody who doesn't know anything about computers. That's somebody who's thinking about encryption, privacy, sophisticated email accounts.
But see, I think, I don't know, what does it say that Safran claims he started working? Because that's
2015, I think.
I don't think he started that early, step one, and right, I know.
Right down. Go down, Jason. Right.
Yeah. Here.
What's that?
It says
in 2015. When in 2015? I don't remember. Now, maybe somebody like me gets away with saying, I don't remember when in 2015. This is how old is Safran?
25 or 6.
Right.
And, I mean, also, I don't remember sounds like something a lawyer would coach you to say when you don't want to answer a question untruthfully.
Or well, it's
it's on his resume because he used this as a resume leading, resume job building opportunity. So it's somewhere.
Well, but he's not keeping his LinkedIn up, so perhaps his resume is not that up to date. I apologize for...
You guys, we suspected that there is a possibility he was there, or somehow he got Peter there, because the family didn't know he was there. There was no car there. There was no rental car. There was the hotel didn't have a record of a rental vehicle. So that's another one of those questions.
Yes, and this is exactly what I'm getting at, because, there's a lot of indicators that something strange was going on at the Aspen Suites Hotel, and that there may in fact have been another person there with him. And we've got this testimony from Jonathan Safran where he's saying things that just don't quite ring true. What else did you see in here, Pepper, that you felt was maybe not entirely on the level?
There was just too many I don't recalls. That was the thing that stuck out the most to me.
Well, stop here for a second. Sorry, Pepper.
Go.
Peter told me to set it up, so I don't remember it. They're saying it's actually Michael Flynn said set it up, or the Flynn group said set it up.
But he's talking about Proton Mail.
Right, I know.
The reason that Proton Mail was selected is I believe Peter had investment in that company, or there was an association. So it wasn't recommended by like Matt Tate or some...
Do we know that that's true, or is that just something that Jonathan Safran said?
I think it's in there.
So I was using Yahoo Mail, and I switched to Gmail, and I'm just, I don't want to have too many email addresses. So, but somebody suggested to me, I forget who, that I look at Proton, and it sounded interesting. So I did, in fact, try to register to get a Proton email account when I saw the first story about it, whenever that was. And it was pitched as, this is, a service, this is great, please do it. We're just getting set up. And so I go through the pain in the ass of filling out the information, and I get an email response saying, well, we're giving priority to our investors in Proton first. And I thought, I'm not getting involved with a scam. You said I could have this for free, and now you're telling me I have to invest in your company, knowing nothing about your company? I'm not going to do this. So Peter did at one point suggest to me that I ought to get a Proton account. I said, I'm not doing it, Peter. So be very critical to understand when it was specifically that Jonathan Safran was inserted or found himself, and on what basis did he come into Peter Smith's office. I submit to you it's likely that he came in 2016. He was certainly not there early in 2015, I don't believe. Could be wrong, but I don't think so.
My also understanding is that Jonathan was a young Republican, and at one time Peter ran the young Republican group. So then you go, okay, is this kid really a Republican, or was he inserted by the Democrats? I don't know.
Yeah.
Plant all the way. He's a plant all the way, or something.
Yeah. The other one we could do is Matt Tate testimony, if you're done with this one. If you're not, we can keep going through it.
Anything else in here, Pepper, you'd like to discuss?
No, I think the greater aha moment for me was Matt Tate, because we had something to compare it against. Matt went public on June 30th with his article about the Russian recruitment story. And then he went on the blog with Ben Wittes that night, and then they further got in deep, an hour and a half conversation about this whole Russian collusion and so on. And so if you read the transcript, there's no connection. In fact, under oath, he says, no, I really didn't have that information. And then they go, did you have access to the emails? No, I never saw them. Remember, this is only less than 100 minutes of a conversation with a guy he didn't know. And he never says he Googled. So he didn't even know him. He just said he was name dropping about certain people like General Flynn, all the things we hear in the story, right? He seemed like he was best friends and working with General Flynn. He seemed like he knew General Flynn's son.
That's when it's being discussed in the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post. When he's under oath, he says, oh, no, I don't know anything about that. So they're putting this message out to the public that all this stuff is going on, generating articles that can be referenced in lawsuits or criminal prosecutions. But when the rubber meets the road, it's all made up.
Is it possible to search this document?
I'm working on that actually right now.
Oh, okay.
Can I interject? This is the document, remember, that is a conversation that is driven by Andrew Weissman's attorney, and that they called on Adam Schiff's group and says, we'd really like to have an interview. Who wants to have an interview with this group?
Yeah.
Well, right. You're putting yourself in jeopardy because you could be prosecuted for lying to them. I mean, you raise an excellent point, Pepper. It's not the type of thing that you would just, sure, I'll try it. There's got to be a reason.
Well, and when we think about this, I'm sorry to kind of take us all over the place here, but in this case, you're back in October 2017, right? The Republicans control the House. The Republicans control the Senate. Donald Trump is the President of the United States. You've got a midterm election coming up. Mueller's ramping up, knocking down doors, coming up, indicting fake companies and fake Russians and this and that eventually. But they must have known, the House subcommittee and the Mueller team must have known that there really was absolutely nothing to the Russian hoax conspiracy by October 7th, 2017, right? And so we need to go back over this ground, and I don't have confidence in Lindsey Graham that he's going to do it. The crowd, the public need to rise up and say, the election that was interfered with is 2018. Mueller shouldn't have opened the Russian hoax investigation. If he was such a patriot, he shouldn't have allowed it to continue. He should have looked at the file in 24 hours and said, the FBI said there's nothing here. We can't do this. It's ridiculous. We'll never win. If this evidence comes to trial, we are never going to win because this is all exculpatory evidence. It undercuts the basis for the investigation. How come nobody was saying any of that in October 2017? Nancy Pelosi is an illegitimate Speaker of the House. The election in 2018 was a fraud. It was predicated on a fraud. And they needed to, of course, Weissman's associate, by October 2017, knew that they were in heap big trouble. They needed to have somebody to blame for all this. They needed to have some argument to make about some mysterious financier connecting with the Russians. They need to fan that flame. They need to have all those fake news stories. And their objective was to keep this cloud over the Trump team through the November 2018 election. So it wasn't simply that in 2015 and 16 they rigged the Democrat primary and then attempted to rig the election. It wasn't simply that once Donald Trump won, they tried every bit to keep him out. It was, in addition, they rigged the 2018 election with this Mueller cloud over Trump and the Trump team. Those results, had the American public, I joke with Jason about materiality, Pepper, about materiality. A material fact is one that, when known, would change your behavior, right? If the American public knew by October 2017, or certainly by November 2018, that the Mueller investigation was a hoax, was predicated on a hoax, was a waste of money. If we knew that, Nancy Pelosi would be back home in San Francisco eating ice cream and not bothering the rest of us with her crazy ideas about who's obese and who isn't obese, right? That's the big story here. We shouldn't just settle for Mueller's a crook. It wasn't just the 2016 election that was rigged. It was the 2018, and they're fixing to do it again in 2020. They're trying to get this country into a position where we're going to be locked down for, there's been a second occurrence of COVID-19.
Yeah.
We've got to shut everything down again, mail in the votes, measure the curtains. Hillary Clinton's going to be your president. I mean, that's the direction they're trying to go here. We've got to stop this.
You're right.
We do have to. And the ramping up of the second impeachment, which is already underway.
Right.
What is that going to be based on?
Well, we'll get whatever we need.
Hydroxychloroquine?
The Roger Stone. I mean, the thought that Trump is intervening and
obstruction of justice or something.
And Barr intervening in the Flynn case, right? And then they're also, if they get involved with the Stone case. So there's those two. And then there's also a third issue underway about what was not divulged and what is still classified, that they think that, and they were there. My God, these guys were in the interviews. So, but they're saying that this is all covered and we don't have all the information. So, they're looking for straws at this point. And then Charles is right. I think all the states now are getting vote-in ballots, so it's all going to be, voter fraud through election fraud through votes.
Wow.
I could speak to some of that. I don't know about you guys, but I know enormous amounts of people who got dead relatives $1,200 checks.
Wow.
And the check read deceased. And
Wow.
I called our governor, and they go, it's not our problem, even though we live in a Democrat state. But they go, this is coming from the IRS out of D.C. I'm like, well, there's no process in place to return the money either. We're talking
horrible.
about millions of dollars, I presume, because I know a lot of people that their parent died in 2018. I mean, we're getting off track here, but this is all part of the next election that they'll try and steal. So who's on that voter list, right? All those dead people.
Oh, no question. No question. Well, we've taken an enormous amount of your time, Pepper. I don't know, Jason, is there other...
Well, I mean, we could go on for hours on this. Pepper, is there something more you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I think you guys are just doing amazing work. I applaud your crowdsource the truth community. These guys are, breaknecking, delivering the same kind of research that I've uncovered. This is just one little small piece. Imagine this greater time frame and all the things that go into this. I mean, this is a massive fraud, and it's on us, the American people. And Charles just said they stole the 2018 election, and they're working to do it again. And I love the verb lawfaring or we've been lawfared, right?
Yeah.
It's just, It's not good. So keep up the great work, everybody, and we'll see where this goes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Pepper.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Really.
Guys. Thanks for including me. It's fun to reconnect from time to time and watch your show. I feel like I bring you into my home and sometimes my bedroom at night when I'm watching you. And my husband looks over like, what's going on? I go, never mind.
Never mind.
Well, it's, Pepper, you're one of the original crowdsourcers. You're one of the very first viewers to contact me with what remains some of the most incredible evidence that's been uncovered in this case. I mean, it's exciting to see that even just reviewing it today with the three of us, we're uncovering things about this American Express serve. And that seems very much like a credit card that he would have in his possession to give to somebody that he could load with money from an app or from, just, I don't know if it's Saffron or somebody else, but just to have an operative or an employee go do things with this credit card. No explanation for that second tank of helium. No explanation for how he got to the hotel. But if there was a second person with him who had a car, that could explain all of that.
Yeah, you wouldn't put that kind of stuff in your luggage.
Right.
Especially if you're flying from Chicago. I don't think that would even get on an airplane.
No, definitely not. So what we'll do is we'll make a searchable version of this and we'll continue doing research. I think there's going to be undoubtedly more people watching who were intrigued by what we've been saying today and who will hopefully help us understand this a little bit better. I want to remind viewers who are watching that in addition to providing input, information, thumbs up, likes, sharing the videos, I can't bring everybody these kind of videos without your support. So part of the reason why we're able to do a show about this is that there is no corporate sponsor saying, don't talk about that. We don't rely on funds. There's a whole other section of this that I forgot to get into where the people funding the Lawfare blog, over $125,000 has been sent to the Lawfare Institute, Foundation, something like that. So it's, again, this whole litany of foundations sending tax-deductible money around to do exactly what, for exactly what purpose, at what time. There was another blog that Shane Harris and Ben Wittes did reiterating the lies that Shane Harris told with regard to what Peter Smith understood was an off-the-record conversation. Shane Harris has repeatedly referred to as an interview. Smith told you, Charles, in an email that it was an off-the-record conversation. The Russians are not connected to the government. Shane Harris has directly lied about that. And when I called him up and asked him about it, he hung up the phone and refused to talk about it.
Yeah, it's outrageous.
You bring up two really good points. Jason, you should be run for Senate. And I would love to see Charles working and opening up an independent operation in the IRS on this whole nonprofit thing. I think that is the richest area of fraud in our entire government. And
I would help somebody else do that. That sounds an awful lot like work to me.
Catherine M. is watching us on YouTube, Pepper, and she believes this was a David Brock plan.
Whoa.
Yeah, I second that. David Brock and Peter Smith don't get along, or did not get along.
Okay.
They have a history, right?
And David Brock's operation needs to be shut down with prejudice. He needs to be fully investigated, dry cleaned, and he belongs in prison. His offenses with his myriad of fake charities that are not organized or operated or accounted for properly has enriched him and his allies. He's engaged in illegal fundraising, not at arm's length, with friends, and he gets away with it. He just gets away with it because he's prepared to be nasty and vindictive. There needs to be a bigger person out there to go after this person and stop the criminal behavior and hold him to account. He needs to pay a very serious price for what he's done.
Is it interesting at all, Charles, that the person pictured here with David Brock is the person that Alan Dershowitz told me introduced him to Jeffrey Epstein?
Is it really?
Isn't that Linda Rothschild right there?
I'm going to say that.
I can't see that.
It is.
Really?
I believe it is.
Oh.
This is a small world. Can I also say that the Brookings Institute should be looked at as well? I was shocked that Brookings is basically the foundation under which Lawfare blog started. And
right.
So when you look at like when FBI fired James Baker, the attorney, where did he go? Well, he's over at Lawfare. I mean, all these guys just move over to Lawfare and they're all in Brookings. It's a crazy little network. And I would suggest that if we had, the next time after the Clinton Foundation is closed and you've got success there, I think you should go to Brookings and Lawfare and move on to that one.
Well, we're doing it right now. I mean, it's interesting to note that just prior to deleting his Pawn All the Things Twitter account, I am basically regularly trolling Ben Witties. I refer to him as Ben Dimwitties, Ben Halfwitties. He puts out stupid tweets and I counteract them. I got his attention one time and I keep asking him to reveal to us what he knows about the death of Peter Smith. And he forwarded my tweet to Shane Harris and Pawn All the Things. And then when I pointed out, boy, that's a real coincidence because I haven't mentioned in my tweets to Ben Witties that he's connected to these two guys. But in my questions about his knowledge of the death of Peter Smith, he chooses to forward the tweet to them. And now they've all deleted all these tweets.
Right. They're gone. I know. I was looking for them for this show. And I would get, under the advice of their legal counsel, it's like, get rid of all that.
Yeah.
You can't.
Well, we have to subpoena
Well,
it.
Wayback Machine has been revised. So what you thought you could get, you may not be able to.
No. I have a strong suspicion
Somebody has.
that Donald Trump, if he wants to get those, he can get them. Pretty sure.
He's got some juice.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So far.
Well, Pepper, thank you so much. It's been an excellent presentation. I still say that nobody has covered this death of Peter Smith story more completely than the team here at Crowdsource the Truth. And it's really just by happenstance.
Yeah, it really is.
Let's
it was
keep
just,
going.
I think there's more here. I hope somebody like your audience steps in and can help us. I apologize for jumping around as much as we did,
No, it's
but
fine.
there's so much here. There's just,
Yeah.
we didn't even get to maybe even half of what we know.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's good stuff. Thanks for including me, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you, Pepper.
Absolutely. And thanks everybody for watching. I'm working on 2 possible late night shows that haven't been finalized yet. So stay tuned, everybody. If not tonight, I'll see everybody tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
All right, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye.